the observation is that we're still struggling with a significant portion of our population to have them in a really healthy and productive and prosperous, that's a word, environment in economy. So that continues to be almost accepted, that it's entrenched, that it's the way it is. And I really believe it doesn't need to be that way. And I do think that there's opportunities for us to change really the world of how people live together.
Let's discover what people are building in the greater Cleveland community. We are telling the stories of Northeast Ohio's entrepreneurs, builders, and those supporting them. Welcome to the Lay of the Land podcast, where we are exploring what people are building in Cleveland and throughout Northeast Ohio. I am your host, Jeffrey Stern, and today I had the real pleasure of speaking with Stephen McHale, a longtime Cleveland serial entrepreneur with a 40-year career founding, investing in, and building companies. Most notably, Steve served as chairman of the board and chief executive officer of Explorys, which he formed back in 2009 in partnership with the Cleveland Clinic. He co-founded and funded Explorys with Charlie Lougheed, one of my former co-founders from Axuall, where Steve is also a board member. In 6 years, Explorys became the leader in leveraging electronic medical records, healthcare big data, and value-based care analytics, spanning 26 healthcare networks, 60 hospitals, and 60 million patients across the U.S., ultimately leading to its acquisition by IBM in April of 2015. Prior to Explorys, Steve served as the chairman of the board and CEO of Everstream, the company he had founded back in 1999, which was sold to Concurrent in 2005 as a market leader in broadband and content analytics. Beyond his roles serving on boards of the Cleveland Clinic, Cleveland Orchestra, Cleveland Museum of Natural History, Jumpstart, and others, today Steve serves as the co-founder and director of Unify Labs, a 501c3 he formed in 2017 to power inclusive prosperity, and CEO of Graici, a universal personal AI-powered assistant inspired by the work and research conducted at Unify Labs. Please enjoy this fascinating conversation with Steve McHale after a brief message from our sponsor. Lay of the Land is brought to you by John Carroll University's Boler College of Business, widely recognized as one of the top business schools in the region. As we've heard time and time again from entrepreneurs here on Lay of the Land, many of whom are proud alumni of John Carroll University, success in this ever-changing world of business requires a dynamic and innovative mindset, deep understanding of emerging technologies and systems, strong ethics, leadership prowess, acute business acumen, all qualities nurtured through the Boler College of Business. With 4 different MBA programs of study spanning professional, online, hybrid, and 1-year flexible, the Boler College of Business provides flexible timelines and various class structures for each MBA track, including online, in-person, hybrid, and asynchronous, all to offer the most effective options for you, including the ability to participate in an elective international study tour, providing unparalleled opportunities to expand your global business knowledge by networking with local companies overseas and experiencing a new culture. The career impact of a Boler MBA is formative and will help prepare you for this future of business and get more out of your career. To learn more about John Carroll University's Boler MBA programs, please go to business.jcu.edu. The Boler College of Business is fully accredited by AACSB International, the highest accreditation a college of business can have. Steve, welcome to Lay of the Land.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
So as far as Cleveland entrepreneurs go, it is great to have a real local legend on the podcast. And I say that, in part to set a proper stage for our conversation today, but I think like a lot of legends, there's a certain lore shrouded in a fog of unknown around it. And so I'm excited to break through some of that opacity and hear it right from you, your thoughts, reflections, how you're thinking about the future. And that whole sentiment for me is, I think, personally amplified because my co-founder in Axuall was your co-founder in Explorys and someone you've worked very closely with over the years. And so I think through this linked entrepreneurial lineage of sorts, I've heard bits and pieces of stories about your leadership and navigating of challenges and different situations. And I think overall philosophy and thinking as it's applied to entrepreneurship. So I am excited to hear it directly from you.
Already.
So I want to start with something that I feel is kind of core to you as a person. And people talk a lot about serial entrepreneurs and serial entrepreneurship. I think very few people I know have embodied and demonstrated that mentality more than you have, where I see it almost less as something you have done and something much deeper within, who you are as a person, almost, compulsory, something you must do. And so I'd love to understand how you've thought about what that internal drive to build things over and over is, and really when you came to first recognize that spirit, within yourself.
Yeah, that's a different question than I've ever received. It's a good question. Well, I think the elements as it relates to, my core are that I like to solve problems. I really do. I just am driven by that. And to solve problems, from my perspective, it requires, innovation and invention. And that provides a really stimulating environment for me. As I graduated college and I had some job offers, and I was, because I had a management information systems degree, MIS, which was a newer degree that wasn't in just the CS, but it also spanned across business. It was a newer style of degree. And I started as a music, I thought I was going to be a percussionist, but then I made the jump. When I realized another drummer on the floor with me, I was going to starve, and they were going to starve. I switched over to engineering and management information systems. That's going way back. But I just remember when I came out into the market and the jobs that were there kind of had me pigeonholed into writing code because I had, learned assembler and Fortran and COBOL and all those languages. And I was like, I really was struggling with the concept of sitting in a cube or sitting at a desk, writing all the code. And I did like writing code. I won't tell you that I was the best code writer because I was pretty good, but I wasn't like a superstar anyway. I was more in the business element of things and interested in how the world was changing. So, I think the awareness of that was when I changed my degree, and I added a component to it, which was the MIS was also, I added psychology as a sub major because I was so interested in how technology was going to change human behavior. I was like, this is just really a transformative thing that's starting to come upon us. And this is a while back. I was trained on an IBM mainframe, like punch cards and things like that. But I was really stimulated by that. And so I think that's what inspired really my serial entrepreneurship is the, wanting to solve problems, loving the process of inventing things, and then sitting back and watching what happens, as part of it. Yeah.
So how did you break into entrepreneurship, if you will? If you kind of reflect on the history of companies that you have started and built, working our way back from, Explorys, Everstream, I believe it was McHale, US Connect before that, but just walk us through the evolution of your entrepreneurial journey.
Yeah. It was that experience going, I don't want to be in this cubicle writing code, but more importantly, it was, I'd seen so many things that I thought could be tech enabled. I had been blessed with, my dad taking me under his wing, and in summers, in between my college years, I would go out with him and into the manufacturing plants. I was selling, material handling equipment and stuff. And, I got my spending money for the whole year by selling with my dad and working with him. But I got to see so many systems, right, that were, big steel mills. I was actually in a steel mill in LTV back in the day when they had a cop, and I watched the whole place just burst into action when the steel cobbled up in the mill. So these experiences, I think, meant a lot to me because I could see that so much was there to invent. I kept thinking about all the people that invented the things I was experiencing and thinking that would be super exciting. And then as I was watching what was happening with the manufacturers, the small and mid-sized ones had really no technology. They were just cobbling things together. And I was like, well, this is a growth opportunity. So I started to do research, and I found an organization that had a mini computer. We used to call them mini computers back then versus a mainframe.
Yeah, right.
Timeshare. And I aligned with them and said, let's go sell manufacturing and MRP solutions into these environments. And while that didn't work out with them because their software didn't fit, I did find this other group, Micro Manufacturing, that had written in COBOL, and I knew COBOL, that built something, MRP systems for small and mid-sized manufacturers. And I went straight into that. And I loved it. So I was implementing these MRP systems and local area networks at the same time. Local area networks had just come out. So instead of putting them on, I had some on Unix and Xenix, but I really focused hard on local area networks because I believe networks were what were going to run the world at some point.
Well, and I think that's been proven correct.
I could say maybe I thought that. It's easy to look back and say, yeah, I was seeing it that way, but part of it's probably luck, that I picked the right horse. But, my project, well, I guess maybe I could substantiate my belief in the networks. My senior project in the MIS program was to build a system, and I chose to build a system for the AFL-CIO lettuce pickers union.
Yeah.
And I chose IBM PCs who had just come out using 300 baud modems, and I got a D on it. So, they're just like, what are you talking about? This is ridiculous. And so there was no network cards or anything, but there was modems. So I took a swing. It didn't go well with the professor, but I did graduate and I did get through the class.
So when you think about picking the right horse, from an industry standpoint, obviously your career, I think, has spanned quite a few at this point. How did you go about understanding what even were the right problems for you to solve from a business standpoint?
Yeah, I mean, that's, I've thought about this because a couple other, part of the entrepreneurs organization, and they have you do your journey and things. So that's, at least I have that experience of doing some of that work. It's like my life experiences that I listen to them, I think, and then I start to then fan out and look around and go, well, this is what's happening in my life. An example would be Explorys, which is I was having a diagnostic procedure, just a checkup. And I was talking to my doctor afterwards, and, the scope printed out this piece of paper, and he pulled it off, he tore it off. And I said, what are you going to do with that? And he looks at it and he sticks it in a paper folder. And I'm going, I was just woke up. I was just sitting there going, that's going to last. I mean, this is crazy. I mean, manufacturing and banking were already, digitizing everything, and the technology was really steaming along. And I'm like, well, this is going to start to happen. So I started trolling around the Cleveland Clinic. I just literally went and met people. I said, hey, can you introduce me to somebody else? Can you introduce me to somebody else? Then I bopped around and, ran into some people that were supportive and helpful, and others that were just kind of like not. And then eventually, and I probably picked the wrong people. I'm not being critical of the clinic at all. And then I finally got to an individual there that, was really interested in the fact that I had experienced manufacturing and telecom and other places, and saying, as an entrepreneur, and they're going, okay, well, we need entrepreneurs. And I said, well, I'm also the money and the jockey. So I said, I've got some capital that I can invest in. So that's one example of how I observe things in the world. And then I stepped back and started thinking about what's the macro view.
Just to, kind of stay on the Explorys thread for a bit, which has since been acquired by IBM, I believe became the world's largest clinical database at the time. Yeah. Looking back on that journey, what have you taken with you as just some of the most pivotal lessons learned along the way, and how you feel those experiences have shaped your approach to leadership, and maybe things that you didn't know from Everstream and the companies before?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And none of my other things where I thought through some of these things that was that asked. And I think that's, given that a second here. Well, when we were running and started actually the inception of Explorys, you've heard that's how Explorys, really the inception of the idea.
Yep.
While we were operating Explorys, I still have a great life coach that does assessments, and she's big on this. And so she does this assessment on, there's one that's called Strength Finders, which you may have heard of. And then she does a much more in-depth one. And The in-depth one found in my top 5, I didn't know it was a strength, called fairness. And I was like, wow, I mean, what does that mean? She goes, you really, you're really strong at thinking about the world through a lens of what's fair. And then how do you, so of course that triggers my problem solving, which is, okay, if something's not fair, how do you solve that problem? And Explorys' purpose was to improve healthcare for everyone. And so that was a bold purpose, because we knew that would be really focused on Medicaid and people that are under-resourced and underrepresented. And so that was, that was a core mantra for us. What we experienced when we started seeing Medicaid data was the health inequities. And it was really eye-opening for us and eye-opening for me, which ultimately, we're not jumping there right now, but was the inspiration for Unify Labs to really get after some of these inequities and how we could make some create transformative solutions to that. I don't know if that totally answered your question, but that's what was going on in my head at Explorys. And I think it was, recognizing that data was the new crude oil. To tell this story, when we raised our B round at Explorys, we had one slide to this venture capital group. We had one slide. We said,
just one slide. Amazing.
One slide. So we'll amass 50 million lives of clinical data, and we'll create 500 million in shareholder value. And they bought it. They were like, we didn't miss by much. And it was really exciting, because we said, the data's the new crude oil. And this is back, in 2011, something like that. So it was a while ago.
Well, it's interesting, just knowing a bit of where the puck is going in the story, to hear about, some of these threads that run throughout your career of fairness, the role of data, recognizing that it had already, been embedded and capitalized in banking and telecommunications, and now its application to clinical, kind of paving the way for what Unify ultimately is about, which I think is really at the intersection of all those things.
Yeah. No, it's interesting, because, we learned it in telecom. We didn't have rights to data. And so we were really, really focused on our next licensing. We didn't want to just provide technology to healthcare. We wanted to have access to the data that we were supporting with our technology. It was clear that the exhaust alone from the data could fund itself, which would allow you to subsidize solutions to the provider, which, are always struggling for margin and things like that. So we already had dynamic of, if you did a multi-sided market and put data at the center of it, the ability to create so much more value was, the potential is exponentially larger. So that's, that kind of postulate is what played out.
So after your exit of Explorys to IBM, the world is basically your oyster. 3 companies over, you could have, I imagine, worked on almost anything you would have wanted. You maybe didn't even need to go start another company. Walk us through your thinking of how you thought about what to work on next, and how did it align ultimately at Unify? What were some of the questions you were asking? Take us through the idea maze, if you will.
Yeah, there was the lab was really a cool experience. It's still running, and we ebb and we flow. We find new ideas and projects, and then we staff up, or we fund, and we go and we work on it, and then we then we'll either spin that out or bring that to fruition. But I think within the lab, when we formed it again, it was a mission of powering inclusive prosperity, coming back from that experience with all the Medicaid data and recognizing that the current system was not working for everyone. And again, absolutely believe in the economy and capitalism and but looking for opportunities to fine tune things. So the lab, essentially, we had in our first wave of things we were working on, we had 3 different breeds of economists. We had a computational economist that had come over from Beijing, who's now a professor at Case. We had Harvard economists that also had come over from Harvard and at Case. And then we had Federal Reserve economists. We had social scientists, data scientists, and simulation modeling expertise and skills. So we went to town and we built a solution. Our biggest core solution we've ever built was Knowledge Product One. And Knowledge Product 1 was amazing. We aggregated so much data, and we started to build models. And one of the things that we remodeled and did a higher definition on was called the Great Decoupling that the St. Louis Fed had done. And we broke it out by the top 50 MSAs. And of course, Cleveland was in that 50. And we modeled the opportunity for that MSA to move towards inclusive prosperity versus creating more bifurcation between median household income and GDP. So we were studying,
and that's what the decoupling is.
That's the decoupling. Yes, that's right on. Great question. And Cleveland had a great pivotal point. I think that was dependent on what kind of industries we picked to continue to prosper, but also ensuring that the types of, especially from a technology standpoint, that there was mid-tier and livable wage jobs that would support that. So we were really focused on those things. And I think that what we learned there was quite amazing. We could see even everything from the infrastructure, that how people got hired. So we're looking at that. We're also looking at what we call the financial vascular flow of the nonprofits. So we studied the nonprofits, and we could see through their 990s who their sources of funds were, and we could see, and then we were starting to look at their impact. As we would, we had this thing that in some cases we thought that some of the nonprofits, there'd be somewhat of a healthcare or a nonprofit Hunger Games, and that the ones that are not effective. And I'm on a board of a number of nonprofits, and has come to fruition to some degree in that we've assimilated or acquired other nonprofits, the ones that are really good and effective, like the Centers for Family and Children is incredibly effective and well led. And so we've assimilated other nonprofits and sectors and taken over areas of services that weren't being serviced effectively. So we were studying those things, and it was so exciting to be in the lab. And, we had Sharon Sobel Jordan, who now runs United Way in the lab, running the lab. Before she took the United Way job. And it was a great experience.
So when you had the opportunity to really be in the data, coming from a place of recognizing that perhaps the disparities were trending in the wrong direction, when you think about the bifurcation, and coming at it from a place of your experience and thinking about technology and data's role and ability to lift people up, I think that might be a good seg and introduction to introduce the idea of what an impact venture lab is, and how, obviously you're working on Graici today, but from the learnings of Unify Lab, what the vehicle, an actual model is for creating, offshoots of it.
Yeah. I think from an overall structure standpoint, we had a model that was effective in that we studied areas as it relates to the journey that people would have as it relates to their overall prosperity. So we started to understand everything from origin, location, environment, resources, network. And from there, we could understand better their trajectory and path that they would, that they could be coming down or coming through as they come from, high school all the way to into the job market through the education system and process. So I think that was really insightful for us to understand what was going on, to include the economic conditions that would change, like the regions that became heavily concentrated with poverty and struggling regions in our area, that the economic dynamics that drove that, like some of the wealth moving out of those regions, and then that was basically almost a flight from those areas that also created quite regional economic challenges. So those things were really interesting and insightful for us. And as we studied more and more, the first thing we noticed was that, overall workforce, I don't know if you get this very thought of this observation, but we did, or it actually kind of came to me one day when I was sitting there thinking about everything that we do right now that drives our economy and GDP runs on a supply chain, everything except human resources. It's not mechanized at all. It's just random, build resumes, say whatever you want to say, build a job description, say whatever you want to say, and put a bunch of people in the middle, marketing firms like Indeed and Career Builder and ZipRecruiter and Monster, and just go figure it out. But no science to it at all. Just really random. That was a big, aha. We're just going, I don't know if anybody's looked at it that way, but just default assumes that that's the way it is, because it went from signs hanging outside of a business now hiring to newspapers, placing ads and people, applying to newspaper ads, to then the online ads and stuff like that. And then next thing you know, we've got these behemoth multi-billion-dollar firms that have cornered, a big market as it relates to marketing and advertising of jobs, which is really all that is, right? So I think we got really super interested in the skills-based hiring, which made sense. And that's really what spun out the initial genesis of Graici, which was Unify Work, is that we said, we think there's an opportunity here on skills-based hiring and mechanizing that really in building it. And we filed a patent, and like with the company with Explorys sold to IBM, we ended up with 3 issued patents there on our technology. And we filed a patent for a Unify Worker for the matching of not just people, but resources, which has issued as well. And so we have, that intellectual property. But I think that observation was, all right, let's go test the market. So just to be fully transparent, and this sometimes, people and or the market might frown upon people that do this, but with every single one of my for-profit organizations, we've done a full pivot. And sometimes, that's frowned upon by investors. I do occasionally share with my early investors that they should consider the money that they're investing as tuition. And so we're going in to learn, right? Yeah.
Right.
We're going in to learn, and we're going to figure it out. Just to hang with us, because we've always done a pivot, and you get in, you learn, and pivot is relative. Some are really hard right turns. Some might be, 45-degree move, but generally, at least I'm the type of entrepreneur and leader that likes to learn. I'm so input driven. And again, when you're innovating and you're inventing, I feel like you have to listen. You have to listen the whole time for externalities. For example, Explorys, as we had started it, and it was secondary use of data model, the Accountable Care Act showed it. And so that dynamic changed everything. And we were sitting there going, 38 belly right, we're sure, we're going to build the measures and the analytics. And I think part of this, right? And we're going to come in and we're going to start really serving the providers. We shut down our data services with pharma so we could hyper focus, put all our wood behind one arrow. We mastered those analytics for meaningful use 1 and 2. We had all the measures for gaps in care put together. We had a measure definition language, and we started aggregating data so fast. We passed the blue bloods out of Boston like they were standing still. And so they were, we came in and we pivoted. When we saw it, we listened to externalities, and we listened for those changes. And like even now with this new administration coming on, now is when we thrive. We just go, not that I'm, commenting on good or bad. I'm just saying when the change happens, and then our ears really perk up.
Yeah, no, you got to be attuned to the signals and listening to them. And, I think it rings true in just the abstracted entrepreneurial story. It's so rare that the business a company was founded on is the business that they succeed with, because if you're not listening to the signals, then you're going to just keep headed down had you not, been paying attention at Explorys, it would have been a very different outcome.
Yeah, right? Same thing with Everstream. I mean, I know, Charlie Lougheed, we mentioned him earlier. And so Charlie, when he came into Everstream, it was great. I mean, we were in the streaming business, we were rolling along, we had all kinds of publishers using our stuff, and we were feeling great about it. And then we were looking at the economic load of trying to support streaming costs with, banner ads, and then maybe inserting some audio ads. And we're like, we had built a lot of great technology there. And so we went on a walkabout. And it's funny because talk about adaptability of entrepreneurs. So we went to the streaming company first in Chicago. We went to one down in New Orleans. Whenever we go there, and this is probably an exaggeration, but it is my memory, they would close their doors 2 weeks later. So I started nicknaming Charlie the Grim Reaper. I said, look, there's really two of us together, but we'd go make these trips. And those were ones that didn't pivot. They didn't adapt. And we still had capital in the bank, and we stepped back, and we had plenty of money, and we said, well, we're going to burn it all up. So we did a major reduction in force because we said that business doesn't work. And we stepped, and we said, now let's go on another walkabout and figure out what we want to do when we grow up. So, we had to make a hard decision like that, but we fortunately did it early enough because it was in a time where it wouldn't have been that easy to raise capital.
I kind of like that question itself. What do you want to be when you grow up? How might you answer that in the context of Graici and what you're working on today?
Well, I think the observation is that we're still struggling with a significant portion of our population to have them in a really healthy and productive and prosperous, that's a word, environment in economy. So that continues to be almost accepted, that it's entrenched, that it's the way it is. And I really believe it doesn't need to be that way. And I do think that there's opportunities for us to change really the world of how people live together. And so I know that's pretty big and bold and a bit nebulous to say that, but to distill it down to Graici, that I think the observation was that all of our experience and my experience dealing at the systems level benefited me a great deal on this initiative. And it's systems always trying to manage people. And, this mission is for people to be able to manage the systems. So it's flipping that. And what was really obvious as we're in this journey, we're doing the matching and things like that. We got to go upstream. We have to understand where people are falling off and don't have the resources they need to get to a place to where they can have a really good livable wage and prosperous job. And then we studied that. It was really obvious that we needed to center on the person, and we need to center on the person in a way to where their value was increasing very, very rapidly because of their data. So their data DNA, what we call it, the digital data DNA, is of great value to the person. I just fervently believe that as we transform into these tech economies, we're going to need to find a way to value people differently. And their data is one of those values because everything does ultimately revolve around. Now, Meta and Google and everyone has made trillions, right, in value by just getting data for free. And I'm not suggesting we sell data or sell a person's data. What I am suggesting is they should get value for the fact that they have all this data and that this data exists on them. So let's get it structured in a way to where they get value for that. And I think that's how we're going to have to start to revalue and assess how we value humans in our society, because technology is going to do more and more stuff that, we used to do labor. So that it's a bold thing, but I think we're ready. I think we're ready for that. We can see right now the ROI in the systems that we're working with players by aggregating the data on the person and having a unified digital wallet for that person of their data, because none of the parties that we're talking to have all of it, but we will. We'll have the highest definition data on an individual ever assembled. And then that data should drive value for that person. Not just subjective value, but also economic value for that person, because all the systems that are surrounding them, leveraging their data, are generating a lot of value for those systems and those companies and those players. But, the person just happens to be the data chum that drives that value. I know that was very, I'd say philosophical, but I just thought it out there for you.
Well, there are a few philosophical follow-ups I have almost. I mean, I'll put a pin in one of them and we can come back to it, which is, I think, related to what is probably the elephant in the room of AI being at the core of so many modern technological solutions right now, but also how it's contributing possibly to inequality going forward. But to come back to that and maybe even set the stage for it, we've talked a bit about prosperity. Well, what does that concept even mean?
Well, that's a great question. I mean, you can see people that are in more challenging economics in other countries and things like that, where you see joy and you see hope, and so it's not just money. It's about joy and hope, right? And it's a lot easier, I think, that if you got reasonable economics to get to have joy and hope. So it's not the elixir, but it's clearly, a core element of it is to have enough money and resources to meet your needs. If you're not meeting your Maslow stack on the bottom level, it's really hard to get to that place of joy and hope. So it's like, let's get to that. And, but with that is building a network and building community and things that we all take for granted. And people that are under-resourced, they really struggle with that. They don't have networks that, you and I know lots of people that could get another friend a job or this or that, we're connected, right? And you'd see that in the bottom earning deciles, there's a lot of challenges there. And but I think it's joy and hope. And, we know by behavioral health data, again, this was in the Medicaid data, there's a lot of, depression and anxiety and things it's health inequity. And, that's where we see the health inequity. And we call that health inequity, but it's really shining a light on the fact that there's a big group of our population that are struggling to even get to a place where they're feeling joy and hope.
So how do you layer on automation and AI into that kind of thinking?
So, I mean, the Graici is ultimately, from a business model perspective, is a personal concierge, right? It's a concierge for the person, connects and, aligns with those that support the person as well. So it's a ribbon overlay of all these systems that are trying to cobble together with fence wire and bubble gum the way to share data. Instead, all the data is on the person. So now you're beaconing out to those systems and you're being able to then say, all right, there's a new sheriff in town doing different workflow, and that's the concierge. That's Graici. So for Graici, I think provides, and we've done some analysis and studies around this and research as well, provides resources to the person in a way that are continuous versus episodic, which changes the experience. So we designed it around behavioral economics. So we didn't just make something up. We went really deep on what motivates people to engage. And with Graici, their experience, it creates an environment that promotes agency. And the agency is the superpower, really, of the human, is agency. When agency is lost, then you feel completely helpless to the system. And that's really where things degrade. That's where things really fall apart. So the number one thing we say for Graici is create an environment for agency. And then with that comes empowerment. And so with that, of having my own concierge, my own assistant that really knows me and adapts to me and really does things for me, it creates a completely different dynamic. I mean, in the healthcare scenario, think about this. And you've got health insurance, I'm sure, and some model. And, they offer you all kinds of benefits, right? And things, or they'll offer you rewards and stuff like that. How much do you take up on it? I've never taken up on the rewards that my health insurance company offers me until a couple of weeks ago, because I wanted to see how it compared to our behavioral economics model. And I gave a $20 gift card that went to Amazon for getting a flu shot. And I gotten a flu shot 2 months ago. But you see, when we're dealing with people that are really under-resourced and, and struggling, their engagement level into the healthcare system and with health plans is as low as it's 15% of the population. 85% won't even connect. And even if there's good things there for them, they're not connected. And so Graici is about continuous engagement and providing rewards and value to them for them just engaging. Not because they get $50, for a wellness check, but just engaging, because by engaging, there's an opportunity for them to get access to and get resources they need to really help them navigate through the world. But generally, they don't trust the apps and all those things that are coming from a plan. They're just trying to manipulate me. When Graici literally pays them, it changes the whole dynamic.
That is pretty fascinating. How do you think about, I guess, measuring the agentic qualities of people engaging with the application? And I guess what kind of behavior are you ultimately trying to change?
For the record, on this video, I did not give Jeffrey that question. So that's a great one. Not send you a free question. Our agentic engagement technology, which is what we've built, right?
Yeah.
Which is a new category of AI companies called AI agent. So we basically use the large language models to come on. We use 4 different ones. They're not the story here. It's our precision coming in as it relates to the knowledge and expertise and really tribal knowledge of all the healthcare things that those large language models will be very challenging to get their arms around. They're not going to do it by scrape. It's got to be lived experience. And so for a lot of these things. But I think from an engagement standpoint, the most important behavior, I think, is that they find trust and they get value and comfort from their concierge or from their assistant.
Yeah.
And know that assistant is there for them and always for them and them first. So we're person first, hard stop. And we tell all the other plans and the healthcare systems and that we're talking to and engaged with right now and in pilot with that we are focused on the person. It comes down between you and the person. We're going to focus on the person. And that's done well. I mean, the organizations that we're working with, they appreciate that. And I think our hope is that by engagement in building a network and building confidence and feeling more agency over their life, that it provides those opportunities for them to take advantage of that can help move them forward into better, prosperous situations. And we think that that's the goal. And that will be revealed, by the way, by all the economics around the person that's to change. Because what will happen is like on the MLR, if you're familiar with that as a healthcare term, the medical loss ratio, medical spend starts going down. And so they should be rewarded, right? Medical spend's going down, right? When you think about that, health outcomes are improving, government spend's dropping. I mean, it all fits into a nice ecosystem where it doesn't make any sense for us not to have our bottom 2 or 3 earning deciles start at a place of prosperity. It makes no sense. Economically, it raises all tides. It raises all boats, right? There's, the rising tide raises the boats, but it rises all boats for sure in the economic models. It's just we've never found a way to do it with our current, our current precision as it relates to how we're operating in our market.
Yeah, it's really fascinating. Semantically, I just think it's it's interesting that we're working towards in the application of AI these agentic models, while at the same time, we're trying to raise the agency of people. Like this concept of agency is obviously really it is important.
Yeah, it's interesting. It feels counterintuitive, right, when you're trying to rationalize that whole thing, but it's not in the end. If you really break it down, as we did in the lab and in other ways, we learn so much that says there are other models. I mean, I personally studied Mariano Mazzucato, Kate Rayworth, Piketty, Raj Chetty, those guys. So I was looking at the models and I was kind of like, it just felt like they were missing some big things here. And they're great. I mean, we need thought leaders like that. I had no negative there, but I'm like, where's the application? And so that's where the rubber hit the road for labs. And then, and then spinning ultimately, Graici out was like, okay, it's time.
Yeah. Well, what are you most excited about looking forward?
Well, I think I'm always excited about the learning. I think we're just beginning and we're going to learn a lot more. And we're in an environment where many of the folks that we want to work with, they're willing to mentor. And that's so awesome. All there is to it, that we're able to get people to engage with us. They can see the vision. They know we're just getting started. We're a little bit past just getting started, but maybe we're still table walking and they want to help. And I think that's really exciting because you're onto something. When they want to engage and help, you know you're onto something. And they see it And they're going, okay. And some are able to, and some may not be able to because of their structures and their in their environment. But ultimately, I'm so excited about the mentoring and the things we're going to learn and what's going to be next. And, what's going to really be valuable to the person and the examples that we're going to bring forward that'll show these, these good and better outcomes. And that's exciting to me to see that come.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, just a few more questions here as we kind of bookend the conversation. But I would be really curious to hear from you, when you reflect on, US Connect, Everstream, Explorys, Unify. What have you learned at Graici that you didn't know, from all those prior experiences? As it relates to entrepreneurship or business or really anything that feels salient.
Okay, that's great. That's a good go ahead. Also, I did not put it up for the record. Well, I'll tell you one thing I learned is that B2C is a completely different, situation than B2B. And I learned that my wheelhouse is B2B. So along the way, as we were taking shots on goal, as we say, we did some B2C shots, before we adapted and adjusted and things that, that we talked about as it relates to fed into the pivot and the standard pivot needs to be done. But the B2C is rough because the reality is the recipients, the system players aren't really receptive to change. So if you're working on one side of it, like the consumer, and then the recipients of that behavior change that the consumer's trying to, leverage may not be there. So you really need to see the whole system, and you can't really play one aspect of it. And so that was a big learning experience for me. I was like, wow, this is no easy thing. That's not for the faint of heart, B2C.
Yeah.
But it's different models, it's a different mindset, I think, it's just different.
How do you layer on, Cleveland, which I think has run true through all of the businesses you've built? Just some parting thoughts and perspective on Cleveland's role and evolution throughout, your journey as well.
Well, I just think about the heart of Cleveland and, even growing up here since I was 9, that they're in the manufacturing space and obviously steel industry. Cleveland has got such a heart, it's just got a core Midwest, great values. It's a great place to live. It's a great place to raise your children. And I think that plus that, that mentoring willingness that Cleveland's got, leadership infrastructure that's willing to band together and mentor each other. It's there. It's really there. And it's not in many other places. And, I've been all around the world and, the Cleveland has really got that. And I think that's really created the environment for me. It was a great environment for me to be an entrepreneur and an innovator, because even when we were just goofy ideas, people would listen to you and, they wouldn't like be negative with you. They sometimes would be smiling if you could figure out you'd get that, oh, that's interesting kind of thing. But, they wouldn't be, they'd be kind of kind, but you go back and look at it 2020, like, a year later and go, oh man, they were being nice. Just we were way off the rails. We were out of line, and the people that were talking to us were being kind. I mean, they wouldn't just say, "Oh yeah, let's go do it," just to placate you. But you kind of look back on it and say, when they would say that's interesting, but not like engaged, then you knew that that was a time we weren't on track. We didn't have the right idea. So, but Cleveland's that culture, and it's great. I love being a Clevelander, man. I love it. I do.
It is a great place. I like that nuance, of that part of it. It's fun.
Yeah, it's freaking awesome.
Well, I mean, truly, there's many more questions I could ask you, but I guess I would pose before our traditional closing question, if there's just anything that feels unsaid, that about the work you're doing right now, or in reflection on your entrepreneurial journey that you would want to share.
Well, my hope is that however we work out with Graici, that it creates a great environment for learning for others to stand on and build on. So, and I think Cleveland's the kind of place that would look to do that. And we want to innovate here, and we're a place where we've got a lot of heart and soul. So I think however Graici goes, that we lay down some real bedrock for others to leverage and grow on and say, okay, we've got some real great learnings here. I mean, not that I don't think Graici will be successful. I'm just thinking it's the start. There's so much more to do, and we're one element of it. And I just really hope that, others find insights from what we're doing, and we continue to come together and collaborate and build and grow.
Well said.
Right.
Well, I'll ask our traditional closing question then, which is for a hidden gem in Cleveland, for something, other folks may not know about, but perhaps they should.
Well, it's a visible gem, but I don't know that everybody really sees it all the time, and it's our metro parks. And the gem inside of it that I learned from a friend of mine that you could ride a bike around the Emerald Ring, and you can get downtown. So pretty safely, meaning you don't have to get on highways. I don't know the last leg of it because I haven't done it with him, but that you can get down to the ballpark on a bicycle, and you just navigate through there. Not getting on 480. I'm just not getting on a big house. Right. Kind of a hidden gem that maybe people don't realize that there's a way to navigate around Cleveland, on safer roads than when you actually want to get downtown. I thought that was cool. I didn't know.
It is super cool.
Too much.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, Steve, I just want to thank you for coming on, sharing your story, and, just a bit of your thoughts and reflections on all of it.
This is great. I really appreciate it, Jeffrey. Thank you for inviting me to do this, and I appreciate you. And this was good for me. So it reminds me gets me on track, keeps me focused. And so I appreciate it.
Oh, absolutely. If folks had anything they wanted to follow up with you about or otherwise, where would you point them?
Yeah, they can email me at, my investment email. I have an investment group. It's just Stephen with a PH at 23bell.com, which is 23bell.com. And everybody thinks it's the 23 Bell and the chromosomes, 23 chromosomes. It's the address of the beverage store in Chagrin Falls. Okay.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Steve.
Thanks. See ya. Bye.
That's all for this week. Thank you for listening. We'd love to hear your thoughts on today's show. So if you have any feedback, please send over an email to jeffrey@layoftheland.fm or find us on Twitter @podlayoftheland or @sternhefe, JEFE. If you or someone you know would make a good guest for our show, please reach out as well and let us know. And if you enjoy the podcast, please subscribe and leave a review on iTunes or on your preferred podcast player. Your support goes a long way to help us spread the word and continue to bring the Cleveland founders and builders we love having on the show. We'll be back here next week at the same time to map more of the land. The Lay of the Land podcast was developed in collaboration with the Up Company, LLC. At the time of this recording, unless otherwise indicated, we do not own equity or other financial interests in the company which appear on this show. All opinions expressed by podcast participants are solely their own and do not reflect the opinions of any entity which employs us. This podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be relied upon as a basis for investment decisions. Thank you for listening, and we'll talk to you next week.